Hi, Pratham here. I'm joined by Rohan, and we on Cow Corner Cricketcast are going to be reviewing the first test, a historic test, first between these two countries in Pakistan for over 24 years. Yes, we're talking about the first test at Rawalpindi Cricket Stadium between Pakistan and Australia. Before we get started, we just want to say, I think, take the time out, both you and me and Rohan, to say this is a really great moment for Pakistani cricket in general. And I think I think it's really good news and congratulations have to be given for the test to go as smoothly as it did. There weren't any issues in the accommodations from all the things I've heard. All the players were looked after really well. Everybody did their job really well. And I just thought in general, seeing Australia back in Pakistan as a cricketing nation, playing cricket matches for after a long time, it's almost been 25 years, it was a really great sight. So I just wanted to first take out the time to say that.
It was also somewhat of a bittersweet moment, obviously, with the events surrounding the match.
Indeed.
Obviously, the deaths of Rod Marsh and Shane Warne casting a very dark shadow over the match and over the Australian camp. But it was good to see that happen, that opportunity to play there happen, and unfortunately, I think we can agree it was not really a match worthy of such both momentous impact and the events surrounding it.
Man, this was the cricketing actual aspects of this match were pretty dreary, to be honest. And it all stems down to the pitch, which we'll address a little bit later on. But the first thing I want to really talk to you about, Rohan, was, what did you think about the squad selected for this first test? Because there were some interesting selections, and I wanted to get your thoughts about it.
So the first thing that I noticed was when I looked at the squads when they had just come out. Oh, wait, why? So one team's picked multiple spinners, and one team's only picked one. The team that is at home has picked multiple spinners. What does that tell me about the pitch, the game they're expecting, and how these teams are trying to win? Because there are certain teams, right, that do genuinely pick multiple spinners because they're looking at it from the perspective of, well, we have our five best bowlers, two of them are spinners, so we're picking two spinners. Right?
Yeah, India,
for example, does this. Yeah. Bangladesh does this, right? Sri Lanka does this. That isn't what happened here. In this case, Australia picked four fast bowlers: Green, Cummins, Stark, Hazelwood, right? And then they picked one spinner, Nathan Lyon, right? That's their five best bowlers. But in these conditions, when you look at what Pakistan has picked on a wicket that looks not that great to bowl on in the subcontinent, it makes almost no sense. If you don't really care about this match, if you think this match is going to a draw, I understand that, right? If that's what your numbers are telling you, that's what your instincts are telling you, okay, that's fine. But you're going to have to go to India and play in India in a few weeks.
And that's the next series in the subcontinent. And so they do need to actually probably use multiple spinners.
You need to blood another spinner. You just do. And I think this is a fundamental problem with Australian cricket, because they never blood spinners in an appropriate time. They never give them an opportunity to properly develop and just be around the squad. And they have two guys in the squad, Ashton Agar and Mitchell Swepson. And even if they don't have success in this match, if they didn't have success in this match, it would have been worth giving them a chance to bowl, because last time Australia toured India, the one match they won, which is the last time before Joe Root decided to be Joe Root.
And a senior team won in India. Yeah.
Was when Stephen O'Keefe, who was their backup spinner, their number two spinner at that time, outbowled the entire team. Every other bowler on the pitch caught 14 wickets and won Australia match.
Yeah,
you don't have that player anymore. O'Keefe is basically gone. His career is basically over.
Yeah.
So you need to develop those spinners. And the only way you can develop them at the test level is to give them match experience and match time. I'm not saying that Pakistan does not matter. There's a reason we're covering the series.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, if you're looking at it, what's the toughest situation? Pakistan is beatable at home. India is pretty much not, right? So if that's the case, you need to be preparing for the test series, like with that in that mindset, right? You can beat it. You can beat Pakistan. India's a different question, and you need to have experience to do that. Only way you're going to get good spinners is to play spinners.
Yeah,
you can't. Because otherwise you end up like England.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's really a point that's interesting to note, and it's well taken, and I tend to agree with it. I would have probably picked second spinner here as well. Swepson would be my choice because he's younger.
I would have agreed with that. I don't think Ashnagar, again, he's almost Nathan Lyon's age. There's no point really.
Yeah, and even though he can bat a little bit, you don't really need an extra batting option on a pitch like this, which we will get to in a bit. We've intimated a little bit about its characteristics.
Yeah.
But from the Pakistani side, right? I know you pointed out that the decision to pick 3 spin bowling options. I actually had a bit of a negative view to that for a little bit of an opposite reason, actually. So in my mind, I thought the decision to only pick 2 pacers, 2 spinners, frontline spinners, was not necessarily a bad move. But the 5th bowling option that was picked was probably not a very good idea. It was a certain Mr. Iftikhar Ahmed, who, to be honest, guys, I mean, he has performed well in domestic. He deserves chances, you could say. But he really is a player who's quite old at this point. And it doesn't, on most of the impressions I've seen him, look to be particularly test class as a spinner, spin bowling option, or as a batsman. He doesn't seem to have like a fundamental sort of technique to survive in those sort of circumstances. And I just thought the decision was very baffling in general, because the idea clearly was to have 7 batsmen, a 3rd part-timer, and then, basically have that part-timer bowl and just give a little bit of a breather to the 2 quicks and the 2 spinners. The problem with that, though,
again, solid idea.
You're right. The problem with executing it by picking Iftikhar, though, is because he's not known to be a particularly good holding spinner as such, or for that matter, to bowl a lot of overs in that respect. He really didn't give that much of a breather to the pacers, the 2 pacers who had spells that they bowled and so forth. So he didn't really help in that respect. And then he didn't bat because the pitch was flat to begin with. Even though
he batted a little bit, to be fair, but it wasn't a match-changing contribution or something like that.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, but the point being, right? They do have another batsman, a younger batsman on the side by the name of Saad Shakil, a guy who has been toiling in domestic for a while, who is rated very highly by the Pakistani establishment. I saw him last year when I was covering the Pakistan versus England ODIs that were held during COVID times and so forth. He made a very good 50 in difficult bowling conditions, batting conditions, I should say. And so the decision to me was a bit questionable, because they could have invested in that youngster and given him a test debut and an opportunity to feel belonging in international cricket, especially given that historically he's had a track record of being ignored in very questionable ways by the selectors. So when he finally gets a chance in the squad, it would have been a good idea to invest and show some faith in him by putting him in the side. Even if they were to bat him in a lower position where he wasn't going to get the bat in the match, he could contribute also with his left-arm spin, because he also bowls serviceable left-arm spin. Not to mention that they already have a part-time left-arm spinner, who can do that role in the name of Fawad. So they could have picked somebody like Saad Shakil and used Fawad and gotten twice as many overs as necessary and given the bowlers a bit more of a break, especially important given that the 2 bowlers in Shaheen and Naseem that are pacers are young, and one's making his comeback after years. So I did think that decision was questionable. Before we get started on discussing our thoughts about how the days unfolded, I do want to make a note about the pitch, because everyone else is making a note about the pitch.
I think the entire cricketing world looked at that pitch and was like, this is the most pancake that we've ever seen. Certainly in the last 10 years.
Yeah, in a long while, right? And yeah,
which is rare for Rawalpindi, by the way.
It is, because traditionally, right, this Rawalpindi wicket, it's got a reputation of being one of the more scenic-friendly pitches in Pakistan. You often do see some live green grass on it, and it punctuates usually the central areas of the wicket. There's moisture.
And of course, it was the home wicket to one of Pakistan's greatest all-time fast bowlers.
True, that's true. But the point being, right, these wickets usually provide a little bit of seam movement. They're relatively firmer than a lot of other Pakistani wickets, and the pacers do get generally a fair amount of assistance on them. Traditionally, at least, so to speak, characteristically in a Rawalpindi pitch. To the naked eye, though, when we look at the pitch, even a couple of days before the start of play and in the morning of the match, it was evident that the pitch would play a bit different to that. The typical appearance that you would see of like a greenish carpet sort of gave away to a really uniform brick yellow kind of surface. There was only a little bit of moisture left in, with a couple of cracks even seen. Now that's something that you don't see in a Pindi wicket at all usually, right? And so those cracks in particular suggested a wicket that would play slower than usual and offer some turn, maybe a little bit earlier than expected here at this venue. And the pitch, when we actually saw it, right, especially on the first day, played to those expectations entirely, right, because it was really easy paced, and the bounce was pretty low as well. I mean, a good indication of this was that how the ball was dying to the keeper when, you know, when
and you could also see it in sort of how Australia placed their stumps. They moved them all the way out as close as they could.
Yeah, because there were several bounces, for example, right? The Stark and Cummins bowled, and they were at decent pace, right? We're talking 135k and up, and they ended up going to the keeper at waist height on the first day itself, which should give you an indication of how low this pitch is, right? And yeah, I mean, there was a bit of moisture in the surface on that first day, probably just held to make sure that it binds together by the curator, and it you could get some turn on the first day, and you did see a minor amount of turn available on subsequent days of the match, but really it was a roll, plain and simple. And a batsman who got in had more trouble usually trying to find a way to get out than it was a batting belt though, in a nutshell, right? And that really did affect the course of this match. But before we discuss the specifics of the match itself, I do want, for all of our viewers or listeners who want a little bit of a refresher on how the match played out, in terms of the numerical aspect and how the result went. Here's a collection of the scorecards for the different innings of the match. Please take a look at this, and when we come back, we'll discuss how the match unfolded and our thoughts about it. So stay tuned. Coming onward to the match now, I want to start with the first session of the first day, because there was something that I was looking forward, anticipating this match as I was, to see, and that was Pat Cummins' captaincy in conditions that were going to be a little bit alien to him. Obviously, he had a very successful run in the Ashes, and he was someone who, you know, had sort of the dream start to his captaincy. And you know,
4-0 win the Ashes, you're pretty much set for life as an Australian captain. Doesn't matter what you do after that.
Yeah, but you know, sterner challenges were going to lie ahead of him, and definitely a tour to Pakistan was going to be one of them. So I was curious to see how he was going to do both as a player, and as a captain, and in particular how his captaincy was going to go in these sort of circumstances, especially on a pitch which was a bit alien to him, and the pitches he was accustomed to captaining in the Ashes during, which were on the spicier side, which had some bouncing. And in that regard, it was a bit of a mixed bag for me. And it started really well, I would say, in the first innings, because in that first session, because he, even though his side really struggled to get a wicket, that was more of a function of how flat the pitch was, and the assured batsmanship at hand, than really any tactical errors that I could sense from his behalf, right? The things that that really stuck out to me in particular, right? His decision to sort of give his frontline pacers only 4 overs up a piece, at the start of the innings, and then immediately bring on the spinner, right? Inside the first 10 overs itself, line. I thought it was really good for a couple of reasons. It ensured that his pacers on what was going to be a very long innings, because of really good condition of the pitch, weren't going to get tired, and so they were being rotated well. I felt like that, where they weren't going to be given a undue workload that was going to, exhaust them for subsequent matches and allow them to bowl more accurately and with more intensity, in theory, in the course of the match itself. And then also, I thought that it gave an opportunity for Lyon to use a new ball, and especially for a spinner like Lyon, who enjoys bounce. The time where you're going to get the most, or the chance where you're going to get the most amount of bounce on a low wicket is going to be when the ball is at its hardest. That's usually when the ball gets to bounce a little bit more than when it goes soft. And so I thought that was a really good ploy from him as well. And then I also thought some of his field placement was good. Once he brought on Lyon in particular, right? Because he, for Imam Ul Haq, for example, right? He had, for most of the session, 2 slips and a silly point. And what that did for the left-hander, right? Especially like someone like Imam who likes playing the cut shot against the spinner when it's dropped even slightly short, it sort of created pressure on him, because with the ball turning away and with those fielders close in catching positions, one especially sideways to it, it made it much more difficult for him to play that shot and not risk getting out aerially if he mistimed it or wasn't able to quite middle it. So I thought that was a really good ploy. And then also for Abdullah Shafiq, he had a bat pad and a leg slip. The advantage of having that sort of leg split behind square of the wicket, right, was that I saw Abdullah Shafiq struggle a little bit to play a leg flick, which is something that he likes playing pretty well, or played behind square of the wicket on the leg side, right? Because it's whenever the ball spun a little bit from line,
if it
right?
spins too sharply, it takes the edge and goes to the slip. If it doesn't spin enough, it catches bat pad and goes to the other slip, or to the keeper.
To a short,
or to a short infielder.
Yeah, a close infielder. It basically forced his decision-making process to have to come entirely forward or go entirely back. Made it much more of a extensive, he had to be in much more control to not lose his wicket for that. So I thought it was a very good ploy in that respect. Having said that, Imam and Abdullah really did manage to construct a very good partnership, close to a century standard, in fact. And I thought a huge reason why they were able to do it, despite the good captaincy of Cummins in that first session, was that they both used their feet really explosively, right? To counter specifically the frontline spinner in the opposition line, because we saw this in the Ashes, right, Rohan? Lyon likes to be able to bowl day in, day out on a consistent, area, and just
it's that one thing that sets him apart from all of the other 4 big name spinners, right? He's the guy who will bowl 20 overs at a stretch and just put the ball in the same spot, do the same thing for about 100 of those 120 deliveries.
Yeah, he's very, very accurate, and he likes settling into a rhythm like any other good spinner, right? Because then you he creates that sort of tension of where am I going to buy a run, and that's how he gets batsmen out with subtle adjustments and that bounce with the overspin and so forth. So it was really important for him to, with the constructive fields that were set, that were good, it was really important for Imam and Abdullah, I felt, to force him to have to change his bowling plan, or to basically put pressure back on him so that it didn't necessarily become an immediate wicketing threat. And I thought what they did really well in particular was that they went down the wicket to launch him back over his head in the V. So they played him very straight, long up, long on, pretty consistently. And I want to make a special mention to Imam in how he tackled the spinner, because the way that he executed this strategy deserves a lot more credit, I felt, because he
didn't get out.
He didn't get out. He didn't get out, but also he specifically went after deliveries that only appeared to be pitching within the stumps. Now, by doing that, he got his body behind the ball, so it would cover the stumps, so that even if it missed, right, he would be less likely to get stumped unless the ball really spun sharply away, which the wicket wasn't really offering that much for.
And Nathan Lyon doesn't anyway turn the ball all that much.
Yeah. And if he, missed it, right, he would be, even if he missed it, right, and it hit him and it was a straight up delivery, right, and hit him on the pad, because he was taking such a big front foot forward stride, there was a very good chance that because of the, how far down the wicket he would probably not be given out. So going after deliveries that pitched specifically within the stumps was a very clever strategy. It may seem risky that he played all these aerial shots off the spinner that's early on might settle down and so forth, but actually the way they executed it was very sensible, and his ability to do that in part helped by actually drills towards power hitting that he's done of late. It was very laudable, so I thought that was a really good partnership, in part because of that reason. But then obviously the partnership was broken, and you have some thoughts about it.
Yeah, I think that was just genuinely the daftest shot I've seen any batsman play, possibly in this match.
Yeah,
it was just completely brain dead. Why would you go do that, right? You have Nathan Lyon under pressure. You're taking singles. You're pushing him back down the wicket. And to give full credit to Nathan Lyon, he bowls a brilliant ball. He sees he knows that they're going to charge down the wicket and try and hit him back over his head, so he just drops the length back.
Yeah.
He says, "Okay, you want to come down the wicket, same line, just a little bit shorter," and Shafiq just mistimes it, and I'm like, "Why are you charging down every ball? It doesn't work."
Well, the first thing that really came into my mind when I saw that shot, right, was that this is really poor game awareness, right? Because it was close to the end of the session, right? They were doing pretty well.
Just take it back. I think it was 2 overs away from the end of the session, and just take it back into the sheds.
Yeah, absolutely. There was no real need to play that shot. But then again,
it was outside of off as well. So as long as you just come forward and look as if you're just trying to defend the ball, the umpire is not going to say that you're not playing a shot.
Yeah. So I absolutely, man. I just felt that. I think part of it.
I also have to say full credit to Pat Cummins for taking that catch. That was an incredible catch.
That was a very good catch, indeed. But I do think you do have to give a little bit of credit. You do have to take into account that Abdullah Shafiq is a very young batsman, right? He's literally played only 5 FC games, and this is one of them. So he is going to be prone to, I think, stuff like this as just a young batsman who lacks a little bit of that game maturity and awareness that obviously comes when you have a bit more experience either in the FC circuit or in the international level. So that does have to be taken into account. But yes, it was a very daft shot that seemed at the time it might have opened the floodgates a little bit, but then it didn't open the floodgates at all.
If anything, the floodgates opened, but in reverse.
Yeah, the gluttony of runs, the absolute orgy of runs started, getting, sort of bursted, because, it was not a good remainder of the day for Australia. They took that one wicket and they didn't take another wicket for a good, I think it was close to like 80, 90 or 100 overs, something like that.
Oh God! I mean, that's just not fun.
No, it wasn't fun. And again, I don't think you can really blame Australia as a bowling attack for their performances that much. Yes, Hazelwood and Stark didn't really look particularly nippy or, at their best. They bowled relatively accurately, though, right? So it's hard to blame them on such a lifeless pitch. What I will say is, as much praise as I was giving Cummins for his captaincy in the first session, I do think he sort of dropped the ball come the time of around the second and third sessions, because I thought he spread the field out a little bit
lifeless.
Yeah, he looked a little bit lifeless, but I thought even more than that, right, Rohan? It was just that he spread out the field a little bit, right? You have a new batsman coming in. Yes, I know the pitch is pretty comatose, but this is a pitch where you have a new batsman to the crease. Azhar Ali, he's not been in the greatest of nick. Yes, he's had scores under his belt, but he also always tends to be a bit of a nervy starter. So to leave, like a position like a deep backwards point out for him, and other fielders in the deep, and allowing them to take easy singles, it sort of allowed him to get set in a way, and so it wasn't able to any sort of pressure that he could have built by exploiting that opportunity really didn't come to pass. Even though Azhar didn't take a lot of those singles, he didn't feel like he was in a rush to do so, right? Or in a rush to score runs, and I think that made a difference and caused that sort of partnership to be an issue. One other bowler I think who can, apart from Lyon, though, in that first day, could have sort of taken his head high or kept his head high after his performance was Cameron Green, because I thought he bowled really accurately and well to the plans that were assigned to him, with the fields that were set by Pat Cummins, right? Because at one stage they were trying to get Azhar out to a leg gully trap. The idea was to sort of bowl these deliveries that were going to bounce slightly above waist high into the upper stomach, essentially, and sort of just like get the glove and get caught by a leg gully or so forth. I thought he bowled to that sort of channel, just going around middle and leg pretty consistently. I thought it was a very good performance from him in terms of an accuracy standpoint. And then I like the fact that he tried to catch Azhar occasionally off guard when the field placements became a little bit more a conventional sort of leg side, bowl at the stump sort of field. I thought he very cleverly utilized that sort of Yorker from a big height and got a little bit of dip that almost caught Azhar, even though the pitch was a bit slow and he was able to just dig it out in the end. It was very nice. It almost caught him out of guard. So I thought that was really good.
Yeah, I also think that it was a little bit unfortunate that Cam Green didn't get more of a chance to bowl. First day, he only bowled 5 overs. I think you sort of have to, at that point, give him more overs. I think that's something that Australia needs to do more consistently. But yeah, I agree. I think he was a very good bowler on that day. I think he and Lyon were very good.
Day 2, when we look at that, Australia would have probably been looking to make a comeback of sorts. Keep the
you get the new ball almost immediately. Just bowl through this, get through this, get through the few overs you have before you get the new ball. Bowl, try and take a few wickets early, get into that Pakistan middle order, get past, and then just see how it turns out at that point. But nope, that's not what happens.
No, not at all. And this I thought really was where the point that you brought up, right, of the second spinner, the missing the trick with the second spinner was really on show, because we saw it really affect Hazelwood, for example. He really
nothing Hazelwood did in this match. I know the figures will say that he bowled really well. He had a very low economy. He didn't go for many runs. He bowled, but at the same time, if you want a bowler, he's one of your 3 spearheads of that Australian attack.
Yeah,
you need him to be taking wickets. You need him if not taking wickets, then rushing the batsman and building pressure from one end.
Yeah.
the reason that he had such a low economy was that a lot of the times they just left him. They were like, well, it's no danger, but there's no reward. If I go out trying fishing for that, why would I throw my wicket away?
I do think there were certain spells where he bowled very accurately at the stumps. There were some where he bowled a little bit too wide. But I think the main thing was really that he just looked a bit lacking down on pace and a bit of zip. I mean, he was bowling close to the, at one stage, and especially on the second day, he's bowling really close to like the 80 mile per hour mark. And normally the Hazelwood we've seen in recent years in Australia has been able to push that up to a 140 clicks per se or so forth. And I felt that I can understand why he might have not gone flat out on a pitch like this, because it is very heartbreaking for pacers in general. But I do feel like there was a lack of penetration in part because of that. And yeah, I mean, Azhar continued on from his way, starting to accelerate a little bit more on the second day. I did think he started exploiting some of the gaps in the field really well, because he, hit different runs, different shots in those particular areas, and it forced Australia to sort of push the field back a little bit as well. And yeah, I mean, apart from one chance that Lyon had, right? But they didn't review what would have probably been a wicket. It pretty much was smooth sailing for Pakistan. It was a very difficult session for Australia. Having said that, there were again 2 moments from Cummins where I actually did feel he, in a match where things were mixed, I do think he showed some signs that he would be a really good captain in these conditions. One, the idea to sort of, as a bowler, for him to actually sort of go full out with intensity and pace and have a bit of a bouncer ploy to Azhar Ali. Now, obviously, Azhar Ali has had issues in the past with short pitch deliveries. He was having a lot of troubles when he toured South Africa the last time around. And in general, he's had some struggles against good pace attacks who got it into the chest and the ribs. And for Cummins to go flat out, bowling almost, I think, 147 kilometers at one point, right? Really, you could tell he was really, revved up for a brief spell where he was trying to bowl a bunch of bumpers, and the unsettled Azhar, that showed a really good sign of him to being, as a captain especially, obviously as a bowler, but as a captain especially, to take the onus as a bowler to sort of, effectuate the sort of change that he was. It was a bit of an inspiring moment, I felt. And it was a good tactic as well, trying to exploit the weakness in the batsman. But then the other thing I also liked about it from a captaincy standpoint was, contrary to day 1, where he brought in Travis Head in the first session as the bowling change, I like the decision this time for him to bring in Labuschagne after tea for a spell, because that was a moment where Azhar and the other Pakistani batsmen were looking to sort of hasten the pace of scoring, because they were looking to set a declaration target probably in excess of 500 or something like that, and they were more likely to take risks against the part-timer, even if they were blocking the other frontline pacers who were more accurate. And so it created a bigger chance for them to get a wicket off the part-timer by bringing them on in that particular situation, which did happen actually. He picked up Azhar Ali to a bit of an indifferent shot. So I thought, timing of when to bring off the part-timer as well was something that was impressive about Cummins, and brightened up what was otherwise a pretty dull day for Australia. Spirits were lifted a little bit on the day subsequent to that, on day 3, because things proceeded pretty. Yeah, well, things stopped being so bad for them, right? Things.
No, it's not the other guy's turn to have to face the music.
Yeah, it's our turn to cash in on the absolute lifeless dead pitch, and cash in they did, because both Warner and Khwaja raced about a 150 run stand. I will say though, it wasn't as convincing as the numbers might look. Because initially they were rocked by what I thought was a very good new ball spell from Naseem and Shaheen Shah Afridi, Naseem Shah, and both were the pace alone. They bowl a bit quicker than Australia's bowlers in general. Shaheen, for instance, averaged 139.5 kilometers per hour. Naseem at 140.4 kilometers per hour, and they have, especially with Naseem, he has a bit of a delayed release. Fast in action makes him appear quicker than he is. So they did have a little bit more pace than the Australian bowlers in this particular match. But more than that, I thought the bowling tactics, what made them lethal more than the pace really was their bowling tactics with the new ball spell, right? Because they bowled with a lot of intelligence, I felt. A good example of this is Warner, the left-hander. They came around the wicket and took the ball away. And so they, unlike England, seem to have done their homework about how to get Warner out. In the 2019 Ashes, when Broad was getting Warner out, fun. Yes, that was in England. There's different conditions in here, but that line of attack has proved to be more successful to unsettle and get dismissals off Warner than usual. And I thought that was something that they executed really well. So unlike England in the 2021 Ashes, I should say, where they didn't really execute that play particularly well till really the fourth Test match or so. But I thought they bowled that fuller length to sort of take the ball away and then get the odd one and get back in really well to him. I thought they also bowled the bouncer when they wanted to very well. So they bowled a couple of bouncers to get the batsman on the back foot, so they wouldn't be as committed on the front foot when they had that fuller length delivery to drive against Khwaja. And yeah, I thought it was a really good spell in general. What were your thoughts?
Yeah. I think again, I agree with most of what you were saying, but I think one thing that was very interesting to me is I was looking at Naseem Shah's landing, right? Yeah. Most bowlers are either fully side on, right? So they land with their feet parallel to the crease, or mostly straight on, right? Yeah. With their legs pointing down the wicket. Naseem Shah is almost landing at a 45-degree angle. It's almost as if he can't decide whether or not he wants to come in or out. Obviously, there are advantages to doing either one, right? If you're going straight, it allows you to keep most of your energy going forward.
Yeah,
makes it easier. Yeah. And if you're going from the side, you get more deception. I think that's what he's sort of trying to do with that 45-degree angle, try to get a little bit more deception while keeping his speed up. One thing that maybe might work for him, I don't know if I mean, I don't expect him to do this, but maybe one thing that you could do is you could get baseball cleats instead of the shoes that they wear in cricket matches, because baseball cleats work in a sense for pitchers, because baseball pitchers almost always also land at a 45-degree angle on their landing foot, so that they turn their foot as they deliver the ball to give themselves more momentum, more torque.
Yeah.
In a sense.
That's a really good point.
So maybe if he does that, it might help him. Especially one of his issues is that he has issues with no balls, and he has issues with, especially later on in this match, he had a little bit of an issue with just sort of keeping his line and length correct. So maybe giving himself that little bit extra stability. And the other thing baseball cleats kind of help with is making good footmarks.
Yeah. I mean, that it's a really good point. Obviously, with the footmarks point that you made, maybe that's a reason why it's not legal to wear them.
I don't know. I don't think it's against the rules to wear one.
It probably, it's probably not delineated.
Probably isn't yet.
Yeah, it isn't yet. But it is a really interesting idea, and it's a really good point, because as you mentioned, there were moments where he was a bit more inconsistent with his line and length, and having that sort of stability, as you mentioned, really helps with that. In general, Naseem looked an improved bowler with a couple of flaws and inconsistencies that needed some refinement, so to speak, in general respect, right? Because he bowled a second spell that was thrashed around a little bit by Warner, bowled some short and wide deliveries. He cut him really easily. But in general, his control over the course of a match has seemed to improve quite a bit because he's been able to hit a length, but no real loss of pace or occasional movement consistently, 5 out of 6 times or even 6 out of 6 times as far in the day in the fourth spell. And I do want to give credit here to Babar Azam as well, because I think part of the thing that has helped Naseem with that is that he's had a captain who's used him more sympathetically and specifically used him in short bursts, right? So especially on day 3, there were 4 spells that I recall Naseem bowling, and none of them went above 4 overs apiece. And obviously, with the bowler of Naseem's pace, it's rather quick. It really helps them conserve their energy and go flat out in the spells if they aren't exceeding over 5 or 6 overs. So I thought that was good handling of him from Babar. Having said that, I do think that Naseem and Shaheen were both let down in their bowling in general, and coming back to the opening spells at hand, by the fact that they really created a variety of chances, and those didn't carry to the slips and keeper. And I felt as if, especially for somebody like Naseem, right, there was an ability to move slips to come in a little bit closer, right? We saw Australia doing it a little bit when they had their paces in this match. And what was a little bit surprising to me, right, was that Shaheen, who's a tall left-arm bowler, right, who bowls with a very high arm action and gets the ball to swing, he had the slips positioned and stationed for him at the exact same depth as Naseem, who's a short, sort of skiddier bowler who doesn't get that much bounce and bowls with a slightly less high arm action, so to speak, right? So there's a little bit of a mismatch there because both of them were bowling relatively at the same pace as well, right? You wouldn't expect the slips to be as there, and it cost them, right? Because the one chance that went a begging immediately, Fawad Alam dropped a catch off at gully. This was off Shaheen of a half-hearted drive when he was on 22 of Khwaja. But I felt like that would be a catch that would be more easily taken if the gully was even a foot up. So yeah, I think that was a little bit of a disappointing thing to see from Babar not adjust that. Credit has to be given here to Khwaja and Warner, who recognized that they did get lucky in a little bit of sense. They survived a really good new ball spell, and then they capitalized to the full heartedness again.
That's all you have to do in Test cricket. It's a ball will get you out eventually. The important part is that you made runs before you get out.
Yeah, and they really hammered Sajid and Nauman initially early in that spell.
Yeah.
In the subsequent spell after that new ball, so to speak. And I thought that there were a couple of mistakes from Babar as well that sort of let them off the hook in that respect. I think Nauman Ali should have not. He didn't come around the wicket to the left-hander early enough. Now I know that he probably has a specific style that he likes bowling. I've seen it in domestic cricket. I follow Pakistani domestic cricket, so I've seen him often bowl from over the wicket to the left-hander. But that angle of sort of coming in and only aiming towards leg stump effectively from a straight, sort of a straighter angle and so forth, it gave Warner the ability to sort of pick several gaps in the sparsely populated leg side to hit boundaries at will, right? And then also that sort of line just around fifth stump that Nauman was bowling relatively consistently, he was able to reverse sweep nicely. There was a gap there as well. So I thought that, Bowler and the captain should have probably had a chat and try to see if they could try that idea of coming around the wicket where it would be more likely to create variation for the straighter one with Nickett or so forth, and make it a little harder for them to just play everything through the leg side if the ball was intended to land at the exact same spot. Norman Ali's, bowling itself in the first half of the innings in that day 3, I think he bowled a little bit. He was very tidy, right, in the sense that he was very accurate. He was able to hit the line of land pretty well. But I thought he bowled with a little bit too much predictability, too much monotony in a sense, right, to the point where the Australian opening batsmen were able to anticipate where he was going to bat, and the premeditated shots here, reverse sweeps and so forth, sort of made it easier for them to play it, even if the fields were a little bit better as such.
Yeah.
In contrast, I felt Sajid, the other spinner, the off spinner, he sort of, where he failed was actually the exact opposite problem, right? Where there was a lot of variation of pace going on, right? There was stages where he was bowling in the low 70s in kilometers, and then there were stages where he was bowling in the high 90s, and it was often happening in the same over, right? Multiple different balls that were varied and so forth, right? It's good to have that variation of pace, but when everything is varied to the point where it's affecting your consistency, which it did, I felt that it sort of added that little bit of release as well. So yeah, I thought that they exploited that really well. And yeah, I mean, in general, right, I just thought the batting from Warner and Khwaja was pretty good, in just from a stylistic perspective too, right? They, Khwaja had those really neat drives down the ground every time the pitch.
There are very few batsmen who are as aesthetically pleasing when they were scoring runs than this one, Khwaja.
Yeah, true. Especially when he pulled.
Especially
right?
off the back foot.
Yeah, he pulled every time they attempted a bouncer that didn't quite arrive at a height that they were trying to get it at neck or
even then he'd probably still pull him.
Yeah, but he was helped obviously by the slowness of the wicket, so it sat up a little bit more for him to distract it. But he did a really good job of that, to make sure that he could punish those little.
Yeah, and obviously his reverse sweeping was textbook as usual.
Well, unorthodox, as part of an unorthodox textbook, maybe. I mean,
yes.
reverse sweep is
well, I mean, in the modern cricket textbook,
yes,
the reverse sweep is pretty much a textbook shot. You're expected to be able to play it.
That's true, and he did execute that well. Every time they overpitched as well, there were a couple of times they tried to overpitch Shaheen and Naseem when they were trying to get the ball to swing. Later on, he drove them straight down the ground, which is very good. And then Warner, on the other hand, I thought, again, off the back foot was really good, but in his case, he was really good actually at cutting deliveries that you normally wouldn't be able to cut. Because, there would be balls from Sajid or Norman, for example, right, where they would be, a little bit too straight or a little bit too full. And what he would do is he would rock quickly back to the back foot, almost landing on the leg stump, and then cut them at an angle. So he was essentially able to sort of force, due to really good footwork, he was able to take deliveries that weren't necessarily available for that type of shot that you would normally expect and convert them into boundary opportunities. And I just thought that was really good, and they really toyed around with the bowling, and I do also feel that Babar was a little bit reactive too much to it. So every time they would hit a boundary, he would place a fielder, right, which is not really the way you should be captaining a side when you're getting hit constantly and the pitch is benign, because good batsmen will just be able to toy with you. And I think they did that with the pump.
This one gets out kind of unluckily.
yeah, that's true. And then Marnus comes in, and once again, Marnus shows why he's
the best player on the planet at the moment, because he just hits everything, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna hit that one for a 6. That one, he didn't hit anything for a 6. He's gonna hit that one for a 4, and that one for a 4, and that one's gonna be left, and I'm gonna say no run.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And again, what impressed me with him was not the fact that he scored those runs, because this was a very dead wicket. But what was really impressive was, and in his case, just from a technical standpoint, how late he was playing Shaheen, right? Because Shaheen very occasionally was able to get the ball to move a little bit off the air, or get the odd one off the seam, the very rare one off the seam to play it. And every time that happened, he middled the bat. He middled that ball off the bat, and he played it with he watched the ball very intently, and only at the last minute committed the shot. So he was seeing it early, but he was playing the ball late, which is a hallmark of a great batsman. But yeah, at this position that they were in, right, it was 276 for 2, I think. Australia would have clearly looked at the end of day 3 to sort of consolidate the position by day 4 and set up a really good target. That they ended up falling just a tiny bit behind. Pakistan, I thought, really had to do with a much better bowling performance from Pakistan collectively as a unit on day 4. Once again, Naseem Shah, he bowled with good hostility, he created those chances. He was able to bowl a lot of outswinging Jaffas from really good length, and they, didn't carry again because of the issues with fielders. I felt not coming up further enough, but that unsettled the batsman a little bit. His delivery to carry in particular was magnificent. It was ball of the day in my opinion. Shaheen again persisted with the full length. He bowled really well to keep the batsman honest with just getting enough movement to do so. I thought the way that he set up Marnus by bowling over the wicket, then coming around the wicket and dragging him wider, and then suckering him into an outswinger with that left arm angle was really, really fantastic thinking.
Yeah, but I think it really showed how much the strange Shah Afridi is still a very young bowler. People forget this. He's been playing for quite some time, but he's still in his early 20s.
Yeah, I think
he's going to be a monster. He's going to be Jasprit Bumrah, but faster, left-handed, and younger.
Yeah, no, the paces throughout this match from Pakistan have impressed me, even though the stats would indicate otherwise. I think they bowled really well. But the start of this show of the bowling attack, the much better bowling performance, in my opinion, was Nouman Ali. Because, as I mentioned, on day 3, he had a bit of a struggle. His bowling was a little bit too predictable. I thought come day 4, right, he made some adjustments to his pace that made him a much bigger wicket-taking threat, right? He varied it up a little bit more. He varied his flight a little bit up more. And he bowled, in a funny way, negatively really well, which is to say that he recognized the wicket didn't have much for him, and so he had to tire out the batsman's patience and make them make mistakes. And so he came around he came over the wicket and bowled outside leg stump, and really kept on bowling it outside leg stump and pitch on leg stump, and essentially frustrated Steve Smith and Cameron Green to play riskier shots to hit it behind the square of the wicket, and eventually they swept and were caught in by the closer fielders. So I thought he bowled a plan better, and just in general bowled well enough to deserve more wickets on that day. Come day 5, everyone expects a draw at this point, because both teams essentially have a situation where 400 kind of or 500 sort of a game. That Australia got bowled out finally for just 10 or 15 runs shy of Pakistan. Again, is a product on that day of Nouman, who I thought did a much better job of flighting the ball than he did even on the 4th day. Got some of the tail-enders playing on the up, and really finished up with 6 wickets, and I thought it was a very good performance in what was a really, really placid pitch.
I mean, considering how bad this wicket was to bowl on, the fact that he got 6 wickets is a testament to his persistence and his skill. But yeah, so that brings us to the end of the Australian innings, and I want to share with you a fun stat that I found out. Australia at the end of that innings had a higher win percentage, despite being 27 runs behind in the match, than Pakistan did.
On day 5, which was funny, which was very funny. But to be honest, it when both sides have scored basically 500 a pop, and you're going in the matches in its final day, you're not expecting a result. And we saw that it was going to be no result.
Not if Pakistan does what Pakistan did.
Right. And what they did was basically their openers battered out the entirety of the rest of the day and ended up at 259, not out for the loss of no wickets, right? And yeah, the match really at that point just petered out a bit of pointlessness, really. Obviously there was some nice moments in there. Imam getting his second century of the match, a credible achievement, even on a wicket as lifeless as this. Abdullah Shafiq, the youngster, getting 100 from his end. But yeah, the wicket was just so. The wicket had almost gone into a coma at that point, right? The pitch, and
that's
really
offensive to the word coma.
Yeah, it really is. It was a pretty bad pitch.
The only thing that I'll criticize Pakistan for is their decision not to go and try and win it in the last session. Not even just because you have a total that's over 150 runs in the last session. The runs have been going at about 3 to 4 and over. There's a chance, right? I mean, like, what's the worst case scenario that you draw the match?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a fair point. It would have certainly saved the spectators who went there or watched it like us on air a little bit of tedium, because it really all looked very meaningless. There was no result or investment or intent to go for the win, even in a situation like that, even if it was a bit contrived, right? They wouldn't have gotten a lot of overs to bowl them out. Most likely wouldn't have. It would have been nice just to give the spectators something to look at,
And I think it would have done a world of wonder for Pakistan's winning mentality, in a sense.
Yeah.
In the sense that, look, we have a chance of winning this match. Let's try and win it.
Yeah.
Even if you don't win it, all you learn is, okay, so turns out we need to adjust what we think is our perspective of what a winning opportunity might be. But, I understand the decision, but also I don't respect it.
Fair enough. I speaking of captains in this match who I do respect the decisions for, especially in regards to this inning. So I thought Cummins made a good decision there. He recognized the pitch has nothing in offer for us. Giving any of our pacers a long spell here when it has pretty much no relevance in the context of the series. Over the course of this, 75 overs they had the bowl on that final day. So he really only bowled them, the pacers, all of them, Green, himself, Hazelwood, Stark, for about 25 overs of the 75, and gave the rest to Lyon and a bunch of part-time spinners. And I thought that was a good idea. Again, for the simple reason, you want to keep your players match fit going forward, and you don't want them to overexert themselves in what is a pretty pointless display in the context of a series, right? So that they get jaded and aren't able to perform in the subsequent test because they've just tired themselves out. So I just thought that was, keeping that in mind, his bowling decision to use 8 bowlers effectively, right? Most part-time was
He basically asked everyone who wasn't David Warner or
Usman Khwaja had a bowl, dude. Usman Khwaja had a bowl.
I mean, I think that's particularly nice for Usman because obviously this is the country of his birth, that he gets the opportunity to how many other bowlers got the opportunity to have how many other players got the opportunity to have a bowl in the country that they were born in?
That's true. Bat and bowl, actually, because as a batsman.
Bat and bowl, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
But it's like, good for him.
Him having the last over the bowl was a bit funny. I'm not gonna lie, because it was pretty obvious he's a part-time, right? He's not used to bowling in a test match. I've never seen him bowl in a test match, but it concluded what was a very drab way of what should have been a really exciting spectacle for both of these teams in such a historic occasion. Despite the match really petering to a bit of a meandering conclusion, I think there was some takeaways from that both of these sides can go forward with the match in, right? And I guess firstly, I think we should talk about Australia because they're the touring side. We've got things on their mind. So Ron, what did you think were some of the takeaways that they could take going forward?
first takeaway. I think we mentioned this at the start, obviously, about the need for a second spinner. But I think more importantly, more pressingly, if you're looking at the next match ahead, Josh Hazelwood does not look like he's 100% fit. He doesn't. His pace is down. He's not getting the same amount of bounce. He's not getting the ball to move as much. So I would look at maybe. I mean, they've recalled Scott Boland. I think Jay Richardson's also in the squad anyway.
Yeah,
or
that's
you could give it to a spinner.
That second pick in particular, right, of Jai Richardson that you mentioned.
I think he'd be perfect for these conditions. He's quick enough. He's a very skiddy bowler. He could probably get a little bit of reverse.
Yeah.
It could be a little bit of a dangerous situation for Pakistan if they have to face Jay Richardson. I don't think that you're going to lose as much as Australia fears they're going to lose if they drop Josh Hazelwood for the next match.
Yeah, and I think
because you already have three tall bowlers. It's
exactly. You provide some variety into the attack. There's a dimensionality into the attack, and you also blood. Again, we were talking about earlier on in the piece about blooding youngsters, right? Giving, young spinners, a chance to.
Yeah. So someone like Swepson, or if you want a quick, or you want a swing bowler because you want someone to open the bowling with. Boland, Richardson, or Swepson, I think one of those three should come in. I think obviously you have to make that a game time decision as to who you want to put in. Do you want to bring in an extra spinner? If the wicket looks dry and flat, I think that decision should be pretty obvious. You pick the extra spinner, take the risk.
Yeah. Or you pick somebody like Richardson because of his ability to be that skiddy kind of a bowler and to give you a little bit less of a saminess. If the wicket has a little more bounce in it, but is still flat, then somebody like Boland could be a like replacement for Hazelwood in that case. But yeah, I agree. They probably do need to sub out or rotate out Hazelwood, at least on the evidence of this match. The other thing
didn't look very good. I think the other thing, of course, about Australia, I think that really showed up in this match is that the first four batsmen are very good. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah.
The weakness of Australia is that they don't have a middle order. They just don't. It's Cam Green and Travis Head if he's in good form. If he's not in good form, well, then you're in a bit of a pickle.
Yeah, because Carey hasn't had a
Carey doesn't bat.
doesn't have a really great record so far in Test matches with the bat. He's also not had a very good match with gloves, to be honest. So there is that lower middle order. There are weaknesses to exploit. And
I think a lot of that is down to the fact they just don't play spin very well. And they didn't rotate the strike at all, really.
That's true. And I think,
I mean, if you look at their numbers, right, like the strike rates, I have it right here. 1 second. Alex Carey scored at 44, got 19 runs on 43 deliveries. Head scored over 100 because he's Travis Head and he's a mad lad and he will hit every ball that he sees. Cam Green scored at around 44. Even the only exception in the top four who scored at a lower rate was Steve Smith.
Yeah, and he's not been in the best of forms, obviously.
And the reason Smith was scoring at a slow rate was that he was playing with these guys and he's trying to protect them a little bit.
Yeah, and also he obviously was trying to get back. He's not had the greatest form of late, and so he's trying to not at this fluent best, so to speak. But yeah, your point is well taken, and actually to your point, Owen, part of the reason why they don't rotate the strike well enough, they didn't rotate the strike, I should say, in this match well enough. There are other reasons why they don't do that particularly well in subcontinental conditions from what I've seen. But in this match, part of the reason why I felt that was the case was they sort of got suckered into the patience game, especially with Maman, as I mentioned earlier, who got Green, for instance, playing a sweep shot in frustration. When in the subcontinent especially, you're going to see a lot of teams when the wicket has nothing on offer, a prototypical Pakistani pitch, right, like this one. You are going to see negative bowling plans with negative fields being applied, right? Which is to say, stuff like bowling wide of the stumps, either leg side or offside, right? And having really run-saving fields where it's hard to, pick up a lot of runs, even if you hit it towards that particular direction, right? You're going to see the Pakistani attack in conditions like this employed. And so if the wicket is lifeless and that's the case, and it's hard for it to time it as a stroke maker onto the bat, you need to have the patience to see that period through. And the way you need to do that is you often need to just rotate the strike as much as you can in those circumstances. Convince the bowler and the captain, the opposition captain, that the plan isn't working, and that they need to change that in order to genuinely create that sense of, to create a wicket-taking opportunity after seeing that the frustration plan isn't working. And I thought that Australia's middle order batsmen in this match didn't really show good evidence of that. So that's something to keep in mind.
Let's talk a little bit about Pakistan and their takeaways, because I think that they had some interesting takeaways from this match, honestly.
Yeah. So the first, obviously, and I think the most pressing one, given that he's the man of the match as well, Imam Ul Haq. This was his reintroduction into Test cricket. Averaged 25 prior to this match. Now averages 37.5. It's amazing how one pure match can do certain things to your average. But he showed a lot of temperament, right? Make this comeback to exploit what were easy conditions to the fullest, and to stay, doggedly there as an opener. So temperamentally, this was a good sign for his career. But I do think, even in a match like this where he had such a, dominating presence, score lines of the match, there are some questions that exist about his long-term ability as a proper opener, because there were signs, even on this benign surface, that he fell into a bit of a trouble against a short ball. For instance, Pat Cummins bowled him the first bounce of the day early on in the first session, and then immediately after almost got him out LBW off a LBW field that was just pitched a little bit fuller, where Imam looked like he was a little bit scrambled decision-making wise because of that bouncer. And the fact that it only took one bouncer to do that, and the fact that I've seen that happen even before his re-entry to Test cricket in this match in the UAE on similar slow, lifeless pitches where the ball isn't really coming very nicely, or sitting up at that short pace, that short height that's being pitched at. It's a bit of a concern, right? So I think he does need to, now that he's probably cemented himself as an opener on the side, he needs to work on that particular facet more extensively, because against high quality pace attacks, or even decent quality pace attacks in more bowler friendly conditions than this, it's something that they're probably going to notice and exploit and work on, and could be of trouble. So that was just one observation that I noticed.
But again, full credit to him. I mean, the way he batted in this match, yes, there are minor issues that he obviously needs to work on and he'll continue to improve, but full credit for him to going back to first-class cricket and re-earning his spot in the squad on merit this time. Not
under any allegations of, or
you average over 100 in first-class cricket. I don't care what first-class system you play in. You are getting into the side.
Yeah. No, it's a very good point. And then I guess my second observation was Pakistan probably need to rethink their composition of their attack going forward. I don't see them dropping Sajid Khan, who had a bit of an end of the match, but he did look probably the weakest of the four frontline bowlers that they bowled, and there do seem to be fundamental kinks there which make him less penetrative, especially on good pitches. Because having examined his action, right, it's a very fast arm action. It's an open chested one, and the flurry of arms and the sort of quickness with which his hand delivers the ball, it can confound a lot of lower quality batsmen who don't really read the ball well out of the hand and feel rushed because of the sort of urgency at which he's delivering the ball, or how quicker it's appearing than it actually is in the delivery stride. So it is something that lower batsmen who are of a lesser caliber are probably going to be more intimidated by, or more prone to making mistakes in the decision-making process than higher quality ones. And coming up against a better batting lineup like this on a flat wicket, that action seems to have been exposed a little bit as suboptimal, right? It's not very smooth. It's not not always repeatable. So it affects his ability to bowl a bit of a tighter length. He often tends to. I saw it in this match. I saw it in the previous matches, even against Zimbabwe and Bangladesh, where he took an 8, for example, in the Bangladesh match. He has this tendency to bowl when not in rhythm. He has a tendency to lose his rhythm a little bit, even in the same over, and drag one down that's a bit short, that sits up nicely to be cut by a left-hander or a right-hander, so right. And the inconsistent nature of his run-up as well, and follow-through after the delivery stride sort of seems to result in these drastic variation of pace that I was talking about a little bit earlier, that don't really seem to be controlled. And that, again, makes every bad delivery that he does bowl, when he isn't able to control the pace that he's trying to bowl it at, right? Often it tends to come about a little bit slower, making it even more easier to punish to the boundary, right? And what was even more concerning was even the spells where he looked like he was in rhythm, which happened a little bit later on in the context of the match. He got better as the match went on. He tended to bowl his stock delivery in general at a bit too slow of a pace to exploit a little bit of the minor bit of turn that you were getting off the wicket, right? Because he's bowling on average in the high 70s, so to speak, of kilometers, which for an off spinner doesn't really deliver the ball above the eye line, so he doesn't really deceive the batsman in flight or loop as much as him, right? It seems to be difficult to get, good batsmen out, because you're not deceiving them in the air, you're not deceiving them in terms of, drift or loop, so to speak. And if you're not going to bowl it at a quick enough pace to exploit a minor bit of turn on a pitch like this where it's slow and it's coming off the bat slow, it's just going to be very easy for the batsman and very comfortable for the batsman to read. So I do think that Pakistan either need to look at changing that attack composition to have invest and try into some other younger spinner in domestic, Zafar Gore, Muhammad Asghar come to mind in that respect, and turn the ball a little bit more. Or alternatively, they need to work with Sajid to improve his action so it can become a bit more smoother and refined, so he can be a bit more of a wicket-taking presence against top quality sides. I think it's a takeaway that Pakistan did go forward from this match. But yeah, that's it from us, guys. Stay tuned, because we're going to be covering the second test match of this historic series. There's all other stuff also planned in the pipeline, so stay tuned for that, and see you guys later.
See ya.